Let's start from the very high level. And again, feel free to use the community call text chat if you have any questions or any points that are not clear enough and you would like me to extend on. So the headliners for Chicken Bond is that it's both a DeFi protocol and a generative NFT collection. Both go hand in hand. The way we introduce it now is that it is a game theoretic experiment and a pioneering foray into what we call dynamic NFTs. So those are NFTs that evolve depending of your interaction with the application, as well as your on-chain activities. But we'll deep dive into that later. So, or in terms of goals for the end users, the Chicken Bonds will provide amplified yield opportunities on LUSD. It's an interesting option for LUSD holders, current or future, as well as trading opportunities based on what happens on the liquidity pool, bLUSD, LUSD. From a protocol level perspective, so for liquidity, it will help us capture liquidity and support the peg of LUSD better, which is obviously a challenging point. So before we dive into how all of this works, the various components of the Chicken Bond system, how they interact with one another, and how you can harness them, I'd like to take a minute just to discuss the why, because I think it's a big topic. So why did we build Chicken Bonds? As you might have noticed by then, I don't know how familiar all of you are with the liquidity protocol, but we have this. Okay. Okay, I'm going to mute you. So, yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, the way things are done at Liquidity are quite different at what's usually been done, how those things are done in DeFi. The Liquidity protocol itself, I think, is a good testament to that. And with the Chicken Bonds, I think it's a similar approach tackling a new problem. So we are not afraid of trying new things if we think we can improve. And when it comes to Chicken Bonds, I'm quite happy to introduce you the new mechanism that it pioneers because I think they are highly relevant. And I am confident that just like liquidity, despite being barely more than a year old, is one of the most forked protocol on DeFi, and not just forked by itself, but also components of the liquidity protocols have been forked, like the stability pool that became a core concept, now used by several other protocols, and it even has its own protocol to provide it as a service, that Speed protocol. I think we will be seeing similar things happening with Chicken Bonds if our assumption in game theory checked out in the experiment. So Chicken Bonds tackle is probably the biggest problem in DeFi if you think about it, and that's the challenge of capturing, growing, and sustaining liquidity. So if you look at the current situation, any token past, let's say, top 100, top 200 market cap has widely insufficient liquidity. And despite the many innovations that occurred over the last couple of years, when it comes to DEXs, liquidity concentration, incentivization, the curve wars, auto compounder, you name it, all of these are cool tools, but they haven't solved the core problem. Most DeFi projects have serious lack of liquidity on their token, and the solutions they are offered to solve this lack of liquidity are either very costly or quite detrimental to the token price. So, of course, you probably think about things like liquidity mining that indeed works to attract liquidity, but usually the result is a massive depreciation of the token price because a lot of it is needed to incentivize the liquidity providing position in the first place. So with the Chicken Bonds, we're really trying to solve this problem at a high level. And the trade-off, as I would describe it, is that Chicken Bonds enable projects to capture liquidity at no cost, but the requirement, let's say, it's time. So it's an engine to capture and grow liquidity over time. So it's not like liquidity mining where you can throw a massive budget and then 3 days later you have a $5 million pool. This won't happen with chicken bonds. But a project that harnesses chicken bonds and understand the mechanism well will be able to very effectively develop their liquidity and capture a share of it progressively. Also, while enabling the holders of the token to get additional yields and take part into a compelling, engaging, fun game-like experiment. So that's a high-level vision for chicken bonds long term. Answer will be generalizable. But now for the rest of the call, we will focus on what's coming up in the next few weeks, and that's the LUSD chicken bonds. So just to explicit the connection here, as I was saying earlier, this is an experiment. We've done some modeling, we've done testing, but at the end of the day, it will all depend on what users do, how they understand the protocol, and how they interact with it. So to try the mechanism and the design we've introduced with the chicken bonds, we've decided to start with our own token. And so starting with LUSD. LUSD is a good target for the chicken bonds because, as you may know, it has significant liquidity needs, and it's been an ongoing challenge for us, Liquidity Protocol, to sustain, incentivize, and grow the liquidity on LUSD. So if chicken bonds have a positive impact on LUSD liquidity, that would be a very encouraging sign and a good demonstration, I think, for other protocols to harness the mechanism. Now, the situation is a bit special on LUSD because this is a stable coin, as you may know. So initially, when we designed the chicken bonds, we pictured them for any token and most likely for volatile token, native tokens of DeFi projects. So the LUSD chicken bonds is a bit of a specific instance, and the generalized version might be slightly different. Still, the core mechanisms are the same. And so enough intro, and let's deep dive into them today. So as I was saying, let's start with what's probably most interesting for you, what it provides to LUSD holders. So LUSD Chicken Bonds harnesses the stability pool of liquidity. So you might know it, but just in case, stability pool is where LUSD holders can deposit their LUSD. They get rewarded with a fixed liquidity incentive budget. And then if there is to be any liquidation to be done on the liquidity protocol, those are done using the funds in the stability pool, meaning that stability pool depositor essentially purchase ETH at a steep discount when there are liquidations happening. So usually that's when the price action is quite brutally negative. So it's an interesting opportunity for long-term LUSD holders who don't mind to have their position potentially converted partially to ETH. And we decided to build on top of it with the chicken bonds. Key difference here is that all the ETH obtained with this position will be re-injected in LUSD. So essentially the position is pretty much at all time full LUSD, despite harnessing the yield of the stability pool. So that's the main benefits for user and what we expect them to bring them in. They will be able to essentially beat the stability pool yield using LUSD chicken bonds. And that's an interesting opportunity for them to get in. Doing so, they provide liquidity into the system, and we start the whole process of capturing it and growing it, as we will highlight later. But first, I want to dive into something that I think is really novel, exciting, and unique. And those are the NFTs of the chicken bonds. So as I was saying in introduction, it's both a DeFi protocol and a generative NFT collection. Those two are intertwined and goes hand in hand. There is no one possible without the other. So what I mean by that is that the only way to obtain a chicken bond NFT will be to use the chicken bond protocol. So it all started essentially with so when users create a bond, so they deposit funds into the protocol LUSD, they can deposit any amount of LUSD, and they can do it at any time. So those positions are all unique. Even if you and I deposit the same amount of LUSD, those are different positions. So essentially, the best way to keep track of bonding positions of users was an NFT. Initially, we pictured it as just a regular technical NFT, something a bit boring, let's say. Picture Uniswap V3 LP NFT. You know, they are an NFT, they have some cool art, but it's not too exciting. But still, the Uniswap has chosen to use an NFT to recognize LP position with V3 because here again, the same situation. Each position is unique. You have two assets, you have a range, sticks, and so on. And so it was the most technically efficient way to do it. This is how it started for us too. So to recognize the bonding, using an NFT was simply the most efficient path initially. But then we decided to build on that NFT and make it a key core part of the product as we realized it was an incredibly engaging way to make the experience more fun and also to explicit the core mechanism of the protocol in a more visual manner, let's say. And yeah, so that's how it was born. So we don't have any artists internally, sadly, but we have great coders. So we've been helped with an NFT creator named Luchador, created the Luchadores IO collection. It's a play to earn game. And so he made the art and the team worked on attributes and generation. And so it was essentially a collaboration to make this happen. But let me get into the bulk of it now. So I have a few visuals I'd like to show you. But yeah, let's start. Let's go through the life cycle of the NFT. So when you interact with the chicken bonds, the first thing you'll be doing is creating a bond. So you essentially deposit LUSD into the protocol. And this deposit, as I was saying, is recognized with an NFT. So let me show you some of these. So this NFT will adjust depending to several things. You can see my screen now. Awesome. Will adjust depending to several things, such as the size of your deposit. That will increase the size of the egg. And it will also have different parameters that can vary: the border, the card color, like I'm showing you on the screen, and the egg color. So here it's generative, so it's purely randomness, but we have something interesting, this concept we call affinity, which is essentially a way to make it a bit more likely to run linked attributes together. So if you take, for instance, the rainbow egg, that's one of the rarest one, and the rainbow border is similarly very rare. So rolling a rainbow egg and a rainbow border together is highly unlikely by default. The concept of affinity makes it so that if you roll the rainbow card, you're slightly more likely to roll a rainbow egg too, or rainbow border. So it's a way of making sure we have cool looking NFTs for most of the bonders. In terms of rarity, we'll be sharing more on this in the next few days. We have an article coming up that will be covering the full details on the NFT. But what I'm showing you right now, if I recall correctly, will be the rarest egg possible. So we're talking rainbow border, rainbow card, and luminous egg with a big sized egg, so a significant LUSD bond. So that would be the top of the egg. And as you can see, we have about 4,000 possible variations here at the egg stage. So pretty much every bonder will have a unique egg. Up to 4,000 of them at least. So this egg NFT is the first NFT you get when you create a bond. As I was saying earlier, it's a bit of a specific one because it's a claim upon your assets. So it contains the assets, if you may. It's a bit of a schematic way to say it, but just to be clear, meaning that if you transfer this egg NFT to someone else, like you send me your egg, well, thank you. You just sent me your LUSD. That's really nice of you. So I want to insist on this just to make sure, because I remember when Uniswap V3 launched, some people sold their Uniswap V3 LP NFT at like ridiculously low prices, and other people bought them and just claimed the assets that were in the LP and made a bank. So I would hate it if that happens to one of you. So again, just one more time to be sure, be very careful with your egg NFT. This contains a claim upon the assets. So selling it or transferring it, transfer the underlying LUSD you've bonded into the system. So when a user bonds, it gets this egg. That's the first stage. And as soon as you bond it, you start accruing bLUSD, another key notion to understand the chicken bonds. So the bLUSD is a wrapper essentially on top of LUSD. It has interesting properties. The main one being that it benefits from amplified yield. We'll dive into how the yield application works. It's also auto-compounded and automatically reinvested. So like I was saying earlier, the position is always in LUSD except for liquidation spikes or situations like that. But essentially all the tokens obtained with these farming positions are translated into LUSD as fast as realistically possible. So it's just a pure LUSD exposure constantly growing. And then, because of the way the system works and how the boosted LUSD token is created, you have an interesting third mechanism, which is essentially a rising price floor, limiting the downside risk. This is due to the fact that you can redeem your bLUSD against LUSD at any time, and so it limits the downside that you can face on bLUSD itself. Oh, damn, I lost the screenshot. Just a second. Okay. That's for bLUSD. We'll talk some more about it. bLUSD is really an interesting primitive because if you think about it, again, it's a yield amplified LUSD with a rising price floor. So anybody that has been doing DeFi since a while would probably have the same reaction I had the first time I heard that. Like, damn, this is an interesting one to use as collateral. And indeed, that's something we would like to explore. Of course, it's not possible to anticipate too much on this because bLUSD won't exist before the launch of the chicken bonds. But within weeks of the protocol getting live, would be outreaching and trying to see what we can do across other DeFi protocol to have them introduce bLUSD as collateral, which would enable you to leverage your chicken bonds position, essentially leverage the yield on the stability pool even further. So that's the main intro for bLUSD. Before we dive into the functioning of bLUSD and other characteristics, I just wanted to show you essentially this overview you find on the website, but it explicits what happened between the traditional flows. So right now you might have LUSD, you stake them into the stability pool, and you get liquidity tokens, a set budget, and then if there are liquidations, a share of your LUSD might be converted to ETH at a very favorable price with a steep discount. That's the stability pool. It's an interesting position, as we were saying, but it also requires some management and a certain understanding of how DeFi operates. So the boosted LUSD yield strategy, so the strategy that is enforced for the bLUSD token, you'll find it on your right. It's the second part of the graph where you can see it's essentially offering you amplified and auto-compounded yield. Where is the yield coming from? Well, from the stability pool, as we were discussing, but also a part of it would be coming from a liquidity providing position. So we'll dive into that just a bit later as we discuss the three buckets that are internal accounting tool of the system. But before that, I just want to take you through a bond lifecycle. And this is essentially this graph. So So, as I was saying earlier, your first interaction with the Chicken Bond app is to create a bond. You deposit LUSD, you have a bond created. Awesome. Good job. You just got a nice egg NFT. Now, the thing is, it's all time based, as we were discussing earlier. So, as soon as you start bonding, you accrue bLUSD. But since it's time based, it won't make sense for you to claim or chicken in your bond the next day, for instance, because you will have accrued too little of bLUSD for it to be a profitable investment for you. So there is an element of time, and it's a bit of the essence of the game here. You'll have to time the time you claim your bond, so the time at which you chicken in, meaning you forego the LUSD balance you've bonded, but you claim a corresponding amount of bLUSD. So depending of your size, the parameterization, and so on, there is a time where we call it the break-even time, which is essentially when by claiming your bond, you'll get an amount of bLUSD that corresponds to at least as much, or if not more, LUSDs that you deposited in. So that's break-even. From this point on, if you claim, you are in profits and you'll be earning boosted yield on the LUSD you have. So that's an interesting situation to be in, but you might want to, for instance, wait a little bit longer to have slightly more bLUSD, but then you are waiting a bit more to start earning those yields. So it's all an arbitrage time-based game, essentially. There is another option that is essentially a principal protection mechanism, which is called chicken out or canceling your bond. And so the way it works is pretty straightforward. At any time, as soon as you have created a bond, you can chicken out. Chickening out means you will recover your fully initially invested amount. So you would have lost nothing if you bonded 100,000 LUSD. Chickening out means you would get back 100,000 LUSD. As simple as that. So when chickening out, the only thing you lose is the opportunity cost of capital for the duration that you were bonded. That's pretty much it. So of course, that's not an optimal scenario for anyone to chicken out. You won't go into chicken bonds being like, okay, so I'm going to bond for 15 days and then chicken out because that's a smart move play. That is not, but it's more of an option for you so that during the whole bonding period, you are not committed to anything. You can simply exit and get everything you had as you entered. So this is also why we present this bonding mechanism, as highly novel. It is because most of the bonding mechanisms work in a logic where you bond your assets and then they're gone. They are forgone to the protocol. Then you wait and you get other assets. But there is no going back. In an Olympus style bond, for instance, you bond some whatever CRV token into Olympus. Those are gone. There is no way for you to recover them. The only thing you might get past this point is on token. Here it's widely different because for the full bonding period, you have this essentially exit option at no cost, but the opportunity cost of capital. So it makes the bonding really different in nature because your principal is fully protected until the time you chicken in. And so essentially, it's a matter of waiting and then deciding when is the most interesting for you to chicken in. So Ati from Chidao is asking in the chat about the time frame for the break-even. Good question made. Indeed, that's an important factor. So it depends of the parameterization of the system and most notably the cap. But in the modelizations and experiments we've been running, it's essentially around a month, about 30 days to break even. So it's roughly the time frame. You could again, like I was saying, you could also decide to stay a bit longer than this break even duration. It all depends of your strategy essentially to harness the chicken bonds. So chicken in, chicken out, and then you've got the basics. Sorry, I forgot about this. So we talked about the NFT quite a bit in introduction. Let's get back to it just for a minute. You might have seen some other NFTs visual going around, indeed, when you chicken in and when you chicken out, your egg will evolve. And so you get a different NFT. This is also why we call those NFTs dynamic NFT, because they are dynamic. They evolve depending of your interactions with the protocol. So I'm displaying right now some NFTs you can see on the website. And there will be a lot of variants for this, obviously. But so essentially what you have on the left is the bond NFT, so what you get when you create a bond. And then what you have in the middle is a proud and mighty chicken, because you've chickened in, you were ballsy enough to do it. Then if you decide to chicken out, that's all right, there's no shame, but your chicken will be a bit more like a chick and might be a bit more scared and a bit like running away. It's okay. Still a nice souvenir of your promenade in the chicken bonds. So I want to give you more insights and perspective into how the yield amplification is achieved, because usually at this point of the presentation, this is what's being asked. It's like, how is the yield offered by bLUSD better than a simple stability pool deposit? Essentially, what's in it for me? We'll get to that point. But just before that, I want to add a few more things on the NFTs because I think they are really interesting. So on top of the attributes that you will get on your NFTs, so we've discussed them, the border, the egg color, the background, things like that. There are also other types of attributes that are added when you chicken in, and that depends on previous interactions you might have done on-chain. So a few things are considered in this first iteration. Ideally, of course, we'll expand it, but it's already quite interesting. And I think there are, some of them at least are literally a first time ever in DeFi and NFT, at least as far as I know of. So I'm always glad to be pioneering. So the first thing we'll be looking at is MQTY holding or staking. So if your address is staking or holding liquidity tokens, your NFT will get an additional attribute depending of the size of your holding. Similar situation where we check for the existence of a truth on your address. So if your address is a liquidity protocol user, has borrowed LUSD, it will also gain a nice, neat new attribute. Now, there's another thing we look at, which is critical to LUSD, but is not directly tied to the liquidity protocol itself. And so this is essentially your VCRV gold shorting activity. So let's unpack a bit, but you might know LUSD is essentially traded on Curve Finance, the DEX. On Curve Finance, the pool incentives are governed by VECRV holders who vote every week to distribute the allocations on various pools. Well, if you are one of the chat who voted for the LUSD3 pool and so voted to allocate more CRV incentives to the LUSD curve pool, then you will also be gaining an additional attribute on your NFT. So that's what we mean by dynamic NFTs. They evolve as you go through the app and they gain different attributes depending on your previous on-chain activities. So that is really exciting in my book. Just another thing I forgot to mention, but I think it's quite clear if you follow the flow. The chicken in and chicken out NFTs are no longer tied to the underlying assets. Pretty straightforward, because at this point, it means you have either claimed your bond, so you've chickened in, so then you have received bLUSD tokens, or you've chickened out, you canceled your bond, then you recovered your LUSD tokens you've initially deposited. So out of those three NFTs, there is a bit of two groups, if I may. The group on the left, the egg NFT, which is a claim upon the underlying assets. Be very careful when selling or transferring it. And then there is a group on the right, the chicken out and chicken in NFTs. Those are cosmetic, if you may. They are no longer a technical requirement. They're no longer tied to the underlying assets because you've gotten your underlying assets one way or another. You've either chickened in at this point and you've gotten bLUSD, or you chickened out and you recovered your initially invested LUSD tokens. Interesting question from me is, can we add more funds to the bond at any time, or is it a one-time deposit? It is a one-time deposit because your bonds maturity accrues and progressively accrues bLUSD. So it'd be a bit unfair to, if we allowed you to deposit at any time, what you could do is essentially free ride by creating a bond with like 10 LUSD, wait for it a bit to mature, and then when it's mature enough, like drop a bunch of LUSD in there and start accruing a lot of bLUSD. So now every bond is created once and funded once, and that's it. But you can create as many bonds as you want. So it's also something important for the strategies we might discuss later, especially if you are going in with large amounts. Maybe instead of bonding 100K LUSD, you would rather bond 5 times 20K LUSD to have more flexibility in how you claim or cancel the bonds. That's up to you, really. So, Pierre, sorry, catching up on the chat questions. What is the value proposition of chicken bonds? We discussed it in intro, but I can go back on it quickly. There is essentially two sides of the chicken bonds. There is the token holders, so in that case, the LUSD token holders, and there is the project. On the token holder side, it provides additional earning opportunities as well as trading opportunities on top of existing yield sources. So it allows people who hold LUSD already and intend to keep them for a while to make a greater yield that they would have made if they use the stability pool directly. On the other side, on the project side, it's a creative, compelling, engaging way to grow, attract, sustain, and capture your liquidity. And so it's both go hand in hand. As your users enjoy those increased yields, your protocol is also capturing a part of the token used to supply liquidity. So both go hand in hand. It's a bit of a win-win situation for projects and for end users, essentially. Okay, so I think we've gone through the basics. Feel free to shoot a couple more questions if you have before we deep dive into how this yield amplification is achieved, which is a bit of the most technical part of the explainer. And again, no stress if that's a lot to take in. If there are some things that are a bit unclear, we'll be publishing a lot of documentation over the coming days. We have Twitter threads coming up pretty much every day. We'll have more blog posts covering different aspects of the chicken bonds. And you can already go on the Chicken Bonds website I'm showing you on the screen. And you will find quite a few blog posts and explainer too on how it works. And there is also user documentation that will be coming up before the release. We're working hard to have it ready, ideally one week or something before release, to make sure everyone can get as familiar as possible with the chicken bonds before the release. So, all right, let's get to the most technical aspect, then the yield application, and then the other aspects I might have overlooked so far. So here we have to introduce a key notion to the chicken bonds, this idea of buckets. So let me show you on the screen. So buckets are quite straightforward. They are internal accounting devices. So it's a way of keeping track of the various balances that are in the system. Buckets might be farming in the same location. It's really more about accounting, and you will understand as we go through them. So there are 3 buckets involved in the chicken bonds, all connected one way with the others. So first, on the left, you see the bonding bucket. So when you create an LUSD bond, this is where your assets go. Here, the LUSD are used to produce year-over-year stability pool then, so a source free of impermanent loss because the ETH are compounded. And the requirement on the bonding bucket is that essentially those LUSD need to be available at any time to pay back the user if they were to chicken out. So this is why they are segregated into this bonding bucket, forming a source of yield that is free of impermanent loss. It allows the system to uphold all its engagement and guarantees, essentially, and make sure that whatever happens, if the user chicken out, there will be as much LUSD as he puts in, at least, to pay him back. The second bucket is the reserve bucket, and this is where the bulk of the magic happens, essentially. So the reserve bucket is funded when a user chickens in. Essentially, his assets are split between reserve and permanent bucket. We can dive into the math behind this, but yeah, it's not critical to understand the system. So the reserve bucket provides a backing for the bLUSD token. So it accrues its own yield from the stability pool, just like the bonding bucket. But the reserve bucket is also a bit specific because it gets the yield from the two other buckets that are redirected to it. So when users are bonding, they are not earning yield, they are progressively accruing bLUSD, but the yield of the LUSD they bonded is redirected to the people, to the reserve bucket, and so to the bLUSD holders, essentially. And now there is a third bucket, which is critical to the part about liquidity, which is a permanent bucket. So again, just to be clear, when user chicken in a bond, the assets are split between the reserve and permanent bucket. So the reserve is here to back the bLUSD, produce the yield, and essentially, fuel the income. On the other side, the permanent bucket is, as the name would suggest, permanently captured by the protocol in question, so liquidity in case, and would be used to support liquidity. So here there is a shifting formula dictating when the assets can be shifted from the stability pool to the curve pool. But the formula is essentially quite straightforward. As long as LUSD price is over $1, it can be shifted into the curve pool to help rebalance closer to the peg at the same time as growing LUSD liquidity. So yeah, those are the main three buckets. It's like how the yield amplification is achieved. So just to make sure I'm conveying it clearly, we go back into user mindset, in the user flow. So you come to LUSD Chicken Bonds, you're like, okay, that's cool. I want to be part of that experiment. You bond, let's say 10K USD. You wait an indefinite amount of time that depends to your risk preference, but let's say 35 days, by which point you can claim, let's say I'm going to give you arbitrary numbers, but just to explain it to you. So at which point you can claim, let's say 6,000 bLUSD that are worth about 11,000 LUSD. So you claim those bLUSD, and now you have two options essentially, or even three options. One, you are happy with that yield amplification you are enjoying because you are making more yield that you will be just holding LUSD and staking them in stability pool. You're comfy and you stay there. Maybe that's one. So you will be just holding bLUSD to enjoy the yield it offers, and when you're done with it, you can swap them back to LUSD. Option two is a bit more aggressive. Let's say if you're more confident on the chicken bonds, and so you've just been through a first iteration that made some profits for you. Maybe you want to go through another. That's what we call rebonding. Then the process is quite straightforward. You claim your bLUSD, you swap them back to LUSD, and you will get more LUSD than you put in. Say, what figure did we get earlier? 11,000. And then you create a new bond with this time 11,000 LUSD instead of 10,000. So you level up as you go through the iterations of the chicken bonds. That's another way to do it. This is all kind of up to you. We'll be providing more insight into the potential strategies as we get closer to the launch. I think those are the main thing. I'll probably take a bit more questions now. I just have a few more items. of I wanted to highlight. So I've discussed the flow based on interacting with the chicken bonds themselves. But remember, the bLUSD is a standard ERC20 token that would be available in the liquidity pool. So past the first month, roughly, you should have enough liquidity on the markets for you to buy bLUSD if you want to. So it's a bit of a shortcut. You don't have to go through the bonding to get the bLUSD. But then it's all a matter of evaluating the current price of bLUSD against its fair price and the backing it has to see if it's worth it for you or not. But so there is another option to acquire bLUSD essentially. Option one is to bond, go through the process, wait enough time for it to be break even and make sense for you. Then you claim your bond and you obtain bLUSD. The other way is simply to swap on a decentralized exchange where you would exchange essentially LUSD for bLUSD. And so there is a bLUSD LUSD pool that will be incentivized by the system. All right, so yeah, and another thing, because judging by the first reaction, some people are still not clear on that, so I just want to state it explicitly. Here, the yield is not paid using the previous depositor funds, so there is nothing Ponzi-esque like that. It's really not a Ponzi, to be as clear as possible. So it's a time-based redistribution of yield. That's all it is. There is no taking assets from previous depositor to fund the yield of the new depositors or something like that. Similarly, there is no risk of bank run because the bLUSD is backed by the reserve. It can be redeemed against the assets in the reserve. So to be even more explicit, you can burn your bLUSD to obtain a pro rata share of the reserve. So here again, this mechanism is really fair. There is no benefit to the first guy doing it because it's a pro rata share. So if you own 0.1% of the bLUSD supply and you burn it, you will get 0.1% of the LUSDs that were in the reserve bucket. As simple as that. Yeah, so those are like the main things I wanted to highlight to you. So now let me get back to the questions. So Adi from Chidao asking about the estimate of the API users will get. Well, here, mate, you are on the $1 million questions. It's a bit hard to know before we see the system in practice and how people actually behave with it. Now, the cool news is you kind of have an idea of the baseline. Because again, Chicken Bonds, bLUSD, they offer yield amplification on top of the stability pool. So the current stability pool gives you the baseline yield that will be amplified by the system. But to be a bit more clear, the expected yield is a factor of the yield we currently have on the stability pool. So 1.2, 1.3, 1.4x, I don't know, but a multiplier of the stability pool yield. And the multiplier will essentially depend on the yield amplification. And yeah, currently stability pool is about 5%, but not exactly, because don't forget about the ETH part of the stability pool. So right now you have about 4-5% in LQTY tokens, but you also have an income produced by the liquidations and the ETH you get that are compounded back into LUSD. So if you want a better estimation of the baseline yield of the stability pool, everything accounted for and compounded, you could look at B protocol and the LUSD vault, because this is exactly what they do. And so it gives you a more precise idea of how the yield will be. So I'm trying to fetch that for you quickly, see if there's a figure. But yeah, slightly lower than 10%, and then it varies a lot depending on several things. When there are liquidations, you will have a yield spike. There were weeks where the API for stability pools depositor was 3 digits range, like 500-600, simply because it was a week with a lot of liquidation. So yeah, right now you have about 576% of liquidity APR, to which you need to add the compounded ETH gain and factor in the yield amplification, which is the hardest part to predict. But yeah, my guess, maybe optimistic guess, is that at least we'll be in the low 10% range, and it might go higher. But this is really hard to to I won't commit on those figures. We'll need to see how people behave with the system, and you'll get a better idea as the system goes. Also keep in mind, I think I mentioned it, but just to be certain, that it's an evolving state, essentially. So what I mean by that is when the chicken bonds, LUSD chicken bonds will be first launched, nobody will own bLUSD because it doesn't exist yet. People need to bond. So people will bond, but they will take time to accrue enough balance for them to be break-even or more and claim the bLUSD. So roughly a month after the launch of the LUSD chicken bonds, we'll start seeing bLUSD balance accruing, and then the liquidity on bLUSD developing, and the full system kind of taking shape. So what I mean by this little parenthesis is that the first month roughly is a bit of a specific time for the LUSD chicken bonds, because at that period you can bond, you can progressively accrue bLUSD, but there won't be much liquidity to resell your bLUSD yet. So it's just something to have in mind. But as more and more users go through the process, the liquidity will progressively grow. And again, this liquidity will be incentivized by the fee captured in the system. So if the system is used, it would be attractive to be a liquidity provider. An interesting question from Shao. I like your angle. Is there a use case for not chickening it out for a long duration? Like if you mint a raw egg, shouldn't the bLUSD accrued remain viable for long-term holding as opposed to chickening in? Indeed, that's an interesting situation. So there are like several situations, several conditions where you might want to hold your egg as such. So as you were saying, if you get a super rare badass egg, that's so cool. That's also a tough one for you, mate, essentially. That's the way I would frame it. That's so cool because you've just gotten one of the rarest NFT possible. So you are lucky, you're a chat. Okay. But another thing is your assets are in that NFT. So if you want to sell the NFT, for instance, to realize a profit, you're going to have to price it at least for the amount of LUSD you bonded, plus a premium that would represent how much you think the very rare art you got is worth. The thing is, if you keep it as an egg, what you're doing is you're essentially donating yield to the system, because when you are in the egg stage of the NFT, so when you're just bonding, you are accruing bLUSD, yes, but then the yield produced by your LUSD meanwhile is redirected to the reserve, so essentially to bLUSD holders. So it's really a matter of arbitrage. Maybe some really rare eggs would be worth something for the art. We don't really know. We'll see how users behave. And also keep in mind that if you want to get the biggest size of egg, you need to supply a decent amount of LUSD into the system. So the biggest, rarest egg will also be a big fat bond, essentially, which makes the stakes even higher on that question. And I'm really interested to see how will people react to this. Another thing we forgot to mention, I'm so sorry for that. I was discussing of like the various primitives that are in the design. I think a first primitive is the bLUSD token, because again, standard ERC20 token with a rising price floor, providing amplified yield and backed by LUSD. All of that makes for a very sexy collateral. While there is another super sexy collateral into the system, and those are the egg NFTs. Because those are NFTs, yes, but they are NFTs backed by real assets that can be redeemed at any time if you chicken out. So think about an NFT lending protocol. You have a 10K LUSD egg, so a bond. It would be maybe interesting for them to allow you to use it as collateral, even with very aggressive ratios. Maybe they will allow you to borrow $9,000 from them, because they really don't care. If you don't repay, well, they can seize the NFT and then check it out, and boom, they claim 10K LUSD. And so, it's an interesting property, I think. We're exploring this, going to see there will be appetite for various NFT lending protocol to add the eggs as collateral. it would be really interesting as it enables you to leverage your position into the chicken bonds and play around the different maturity dates of your eggs. So really to start essentially turning your simple farmer activity into an industrial leverage egg hatching factory. Um, Yeah, I think I saw questions about the front end earlier, or was it me? But yeah, I realize I haven't talked about this, so I'll just mention it. So for the front end, the approach is just exactly the same as liquidity. We will not be hosting a front end ourselves. The liquidity team will not be operating a front end. However, the liquidity team has developed and provided what we call a front end kit, making it really easy for third parties to spin out a front end. And we are currently reaching out, discussing with the current operators of liquidity front ends to make sure a significant share of them will be adding the elements, the pages related to the chicken bonds at launch. So you'll have several options to interact with the chicken bonds protocol from day one, but nothing hosted by us. Everything will go through third party, the usual front ends you are familiar with. All right, it's been an hour, so I think it's probably good. I'll give you a few more minutes if you have questions, and let me think if I've forgotten anything anything of significance. But yeah, feel free to shoot if you have more questions. I think I covered it all. For now, again, we have more docs coming up. So really, if you're interested in the concept, you want to start preparing your strategies, you want to understand better how it works at the technical level, please feel free to read the Chicken Bonds blog or the Chicken Bonds website, and feel free to share with others and let them know about it. Um, we have, yeah, I have a few more infographics if you want, I could add to the chat. The one I've used in the presentation. Um, which here. So here you go. Um, and even a few more teasing stuff for uh, the egg variations. So I'll show you some. Keep in mind, those are like generated variations. They are slightly different than what you will get as the end. Most notably here, all bonds are the same date and size, which kind of shows you like the scope of possibilities. Regarding ETA, we are targeting early October, and yeah, we'll be discussing chicken bonds more and more and releasing all necessary documentation as we approach the launch date. But it's coming really shortly. A novel mechanism, both on the DeFi and NFT side. So feel free to take time already to get familiarized with it, because I really think that users who've done their homework will have an edge in how the game will unfold, essentially. All right, then. If there is any hero amongst the community who surprisingly, sneakily recorded that call and haven't told me yet, feel free to manifest yourself. If not, it's all right. You guys will have had access to a unique presentation, and will be doing more of them anyway. So there will be another piece of content similar available on YouTube. All right, then. Thanks you all for participating to the community call, introducing the LUSD Chicken Bonds. We'll have more of this coming in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. Make sure to follow Liquidity on Twitter and check out the Discord. We'll be announcing them. Yeah, looking forward to get closer to the release and see how you all interact with this very innovative protocol. Thanks. Have a good day.